In June 1990, barely months after walking free from 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela stood before the United States Congress. The room rose to thunderous applause, but what followed was silence, one born of moral gravity. Before I continue, I'd like you to just take some minutes to watch this video.
Questioner at the microphone over there, Mr.
Welcome to America, Mr. Mandela. I'm Ken Edelman. Those of us who share your struggle for human rights and against apartheid have been somewhat disappointed by the models of human rights that you have held up since being released in jail. You've met over the last 6 months 3 times with Yasser Arafat, who you have praised. You have told Gaddafi that you share the view and applaud him on his record of human rights and his drive for freedom and peace around the world. And you have praised Fidel Castro as a leader of human rights and said that Cuba was one of the countries that's head and shoulders above all other countries in human rights, despite the fact that documents at the United Nations and elsewhere show that Cuba is one of the worst. I was just wondering, are these your models of leaders of human rights? And if so, would you want a Gaddafi or an Arafat or a Castro to be a future president of South Africa?
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. That we can and we will never do. We have our own struggle which we are conducting. We are grateful to the world for supporting our struggle. But nevertheless, we are an independent organization with its own policy. And the attitude of every country towards, our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle.
When asked about his unwavering friendship with Cuba's Fidel Castro and other socialist nations condemned by the West, Mandela replied with disarming clarity. As evidence from the video, he said, "We are now being asked to choose our friends by those who have supported the apartheid regime all these years. Our enemies are not necessarily your enemies." It was a statement that rippled across global politics. Mandela, still a man rebuilding a broken nation, refused to let his alliances be dictated by world powers. He was not there to fight for nations, but for truth. His loyalty was not political blocks, but to justice and his people's liberation. That moment, one of conviction, courage, and costly independence, mirrors the ancient crossroads Joshua faced near Jericho. There, in the same vein, stood 2 armies, 2 causes, and one ultimate question. Whose side are you on? The answer, then as now, was divine and startling. Nay, but as the commander of the Lord's army, I have now come, as we have seen in Joshua 5, verse 14. I welcome you once again to Steady Insights. I believe the prologue has been interesting. Let's delve deeper then. The parties in conflict. Joshua's sandals pressed into the dry earth near Jericho. The walls loomed before him, unbroken, defiant. impenetrable. He needed divine strategy. But instead of a plan, he met a person, a warrior whose sword was already drawn. Joshua asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And the reply shattered every human assumption. "Nay, but as the commander of the Lord's army, I have now come." It wasn't a mere angel. In fact, it was God himself, pre-incarnate Christ appearing as the Prince of the Lord's host. He accepted worship, which is something no mere angel would ever do, and claimed leadership, not of earthly armies, but of heaven's legions. In that instant, Joshua realized that God's not enlisted to human causes. He is not on Israel's side or Jericho's side. He is on the side of righteousness within a global warfare. He is on the side of justice and truth. And so before the first trumpet sounded or the first war cracked, Joshua bowed, because the true battle is not fought by human strategy, but by divine surrender. Do you know that long before Jericho's wall stood, another prince had drawn a sword? Lucifer, the anointed cherub, according to the 28th chapter of Ezekiel. He had stood near God's throne, radiant and perfect, until pride poisoned his will. The conflict that began in heaven's courts now played out on earthly soil. Its echo heard in every nation, every ideology, and every heart. Isaiah paints his ambition in this clear detail. "I will ascend to the heavens. I will make myself like the Most High." Isaiah 14:13-14. From that rebellion flowed every conflict known to man. Wars of nations, rivalries of tribes, the greed of corporations, even the turmoil with families. All these are micro battles of that one cosmic war. Unfortunately, Satan does not care which banner we fly, so long as we rebel against God's authority. In essence, the conquest of Canaan, therefore, was not a national expansion. No, it was a spiritual offensive in a universal war. It is noteworthy that behind Jericho's walls stood not just Canaanite soldiers, but the very demons that opposed God's redemptive plan. I believe you are learning. And it brings us to the man of war. Probably you have seen that scripture is not shy to describe God as a man of war. At least we see that in Exodus chapter 15 verse 3. Yet, as students of the biblical records and people who would want to excavate facts which are backed by happenings, God's warfare is unlike any known to human history. He does not fight to conquer bodies, but to reclaim souls. And we see this in several places within the biblical records. The plagues of Egypt were not random disasters. They were targeted strikes against the gods of Egypt. And that is why, clearly, every plague dismantled a false deity, revealing how impotent and powerless these demons were. In Canaan, the same principle was happening. God fought to cleanse the land from those who had enslaved themselves to evil. But even as he expelled nations, his heart was not vengeance. It was restoration. Every war God wages, as we have seen, per the symbolic languages used in various parts of the Bible and the historical records as far as the sojourn of Israel is concerned, is redemptive in purpose. God wages war not for destruction, but for redemption. And today, the front lines have shifted again. The war is not for land, but for loyalty. Not for cities, but for hearts. In every home, every screen, every decision, even now as you go through this particular episode, the same question is whispered. Whose side are you on? More importantly, we have to realize the strategies of conflict. It is quite clear that sometimes people are made to feel heaven is fighting for them. The original blueprint for Israel's conquest was entirely divine. God promised to drive out their enemies without a single sword being drawn. And you want to ask, where is it written? Well, in Exodus 23 verse 28, we see God saying, I will send the hornet ahead of you. Nature itself was meant to be the army of Israel. But they did not believe. Had Israel believed, the campaign would have been miraculous, bloodless, and swift. Well, we see that in history. Clearly, God can do a lot when his people simply trust. Let's see some few examples. He drowned the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. They didn't need any effort on the part of the Israelites, but just to trust. He rained hailstones on the Canaanites, according to Joshua 10 verse 11. He blinded the Syrian army to save Elisha, as seen in 2 Kings 6 verse 14 through 23. Then most powerfully, he struck 185,000 Assyrians in one night. You see this? Heaven's victories often defy human logic. But when faith falters, swords are drawn. And clearly, the costs can be very, very daunting. Israel's unbelief changed the whole nature of their mission. And by this time, I believe you would have realized that the same people who once asked, is the Lord amongst us or not, now had to learn faith through warfare. Basically, God allowed Israel to fight not because he needed their help, but because they needed his training. Every battle forged obedience, dependence, and spiritual maturity. The Canaanites were not victims of cruelty, I should say, but they were nations that had exhausted grace. Their destruction was judicial, not racial. It was divine justice after centuries of warning. And it's no surprise that just as Israel's physical battles refined their trust, in our current world, our spiritual battles refine ours. And Paul makes it clear in Ephesians 6 verse 12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We fight not with swords, but with surrender, not to conquer land, but to let God conquer us. Wow. Very clearly, Joshua learned a very important lesson at Jericho. That victory does not come from asking, is God on our side, but from ensuring that we are rather on his side. And in this eternal conflict, the conflict behind all conflicts, the greatest commander still stands with the sword drawn, calling every believer to choose. The battle may be cosmic, but the decision is personal. The war may rage unseen, but its victory is already won. The Lord is a warrior, and the Lord is his name. Are you on his side?